you here. I'm Mahesh, 𝘥𝘲𝘁𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗏, the director of Radicle Gallery. This program is our first collaboration between Millennium Art, Contemporary, and Radicle. We are all excited to have such an interesting group of people for the panel discussion today to speak on a very contemporary topic that goes beyond talking merely on art. The panel discussion titled 𝘒𝗪𝘳𝗵 in retrospect is part of the Revisit series of exhibitions by MiAC that is being held at their gallery in 𝘠𝘂𝘁 to bring contemporary dialogue, emerging art with more socially and politically engaging topics. It definitely brings more complexity to art. I will not talk at length about the project as Radhika Hettiarachchi here, who will be moderating the panel in brief moments. I will say something about Radicle and why we are interested in collaboration such as this, as it brings the art community together. Our goal here at Radicle is a very simple one. It's to help the artists reach their potential, to be a reliable gallery, and to improve the art industry in Sri Lanka. It's great to see such a lovely audience here, and let me welcome you again on behalf of Radicle and MiAC. Also welcome to the panel Anoli, Jagath, Sasanka, and Radhika. Before I give away to the proceedings of the panel, let me introduce Radhika Hettiarachchi, who would be moderating the panel. Radhika is a public historian, researcher, and peace-building practitioner with 20 years of experience based in Sri Lanka, dedicated to facilitating positive change in communities undergoing transition. She uses innovative approaches that integrate arts and culture, oral history, and memorization to amplify marginalized voices, promote human rights, and advance inclusive development. She has curated the Landscape Festival Art in 2014 and 15, the inaugural It's About Time Traveling Historyism in 2019, and Shared Journeys, a 7-country online exhibition in 2021. After African Crisis, a beginner house in India in 2025, all of which challenge audiences to think beyond dominant barriers. She worked for the UN and International Alert as an independent public history practitioner. She is currently a trustee of the Collective of Historical Dialogues and an advisor for Insights Initiative.
Thank you so much. Before we begin the panel discussion, I'm going to introduce the panelists. All of you know them, but still, there's lots we don't know about them when you read their biographies. But in very brief, I'd like to introduce Anoli Perera. She's a pioneering Sri Lankan visual artist whose practice spans over 3 decades. She was part of the 90s trend, and as a prominent female voice, her conceptual art directly challenges post-colonial societal structures and traditional definitions of femininity. Her multidisciplinary work includes paintings, sculptures, and installations that merge textiles, lace, and bricolage to explore memory and domesticity. She co-founded the 𝘒𝗪𝘳𝗵 International Artists Collective, and at present is the director of the Millennium Art Contemporary. Jagath Weerasinghe is an important contemporary Sri Lankan artist, archaeologist, and professor who fundamentally transformed his country's creative landscape. He coined and established the 90s trend, an art movement that contemporized Sri Lankan art and made it gravitate towards socially and politically charged themes responding to civil war and unrest. He earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of California and Master of Fine Arts from American University in Washington, D.C. He co-founded the 𝘒𝗪𝘳 International Artists Collective to foster contemporary art and build vital platforms to mentor emerging Sri Lankan and South Asian artists. He's also a director at Millennium Art Contemporary. Sasanka Perera is director at Center for Poverty Analysis and 𝘒𝗪𝘳𝗵 Academic Publishers, Columbia. He was the founding professor of sociology at South Asian University, New Delhi, from 2011 until his retirement in July 2024. He was Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences from 2011 to 2018, and from 2021 to 2022, and South Asian University's Vice President from 2016 to 2019. Prior to that, he taught at the University of Colombo for 19 years. Trained as a cultural anthropologist in his teaching career, he has traveled subject areas that are considered both sociology and anthropology. His research interests are varied and spans cultural and political analysis, education, language politics, visual cultures, urban space, and migration. Broadly speaking, his main interest lies in contemporary social theory with an emphasis on the idea of culture and its politics. He has written extensively and is widely published both locally and internationally in English and singular languages. He has won 2 Sri Lanka State Awards in 2023 for translating poetry and for translating a play. Welcome to our distinguished panel. Before I ask you a few questions, I wanted to give a brief introduction of the 𝘕𝗠𝗪 project. This I took from the book project, what you can buy over there as well. The 𝘕𝗠𝗪 art project, conceived by the International Artists Collective in Colombo and One Shanti Road Studio Gallery in Bangalore, ran as a 3-year collaborative residency between 2009 and 2013. The project unfolded against the backdrop of a region struggling to articulate what connection, proximity, and shared history mean in conditions of violence, nationalism, and slow collapse of democratic space, and the possibility of building back better after the protracted Sri Lankan civil war. Taking the mythical 𝘕𝗠𝗪 bridge between Sri Lanka and India as a metaphor, the project positioned itself explicitly against state-driven cultural diplomacy, seeking instead to create a genuine dialogue through this artist-led platform in which the global souths of India and Sri Lanka could think together, link together, across the many layers of contested borders between them. The artworks it produced were varied and ambitious, spanning painting, drawing, sculpture, installation, performance, and participatory practice, were shown in many spaces in both countries until it was finally launched as a book project called 𝘕𝗠𝗪 in 2014. It was a collaboration of many artists involved in the 2 collectives, including, and I won't name everybody, but I'll name a few, Suresh Jairam, Aishwarya Bhavani GS, Urmila Vijay, Dimple Shah, Pradeep K, and of course, Anoli Perera, Jagath Weerasinghe, Bandhumanan Peri, Janani Kure, 𝘠𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓, Pala Pradeep Talwar, Satora, to name a few. The retrospective exhibition opened at MiAC and will run till the end of July, so please, if you have the opportunity, go and see it. So the decision to revisit and represent the 𝘕𝗠𝗪 art project a decade or more later, after its conclusion, is more than just a curatorial choice. It can be a political act, one that demands a reckoning with what has and has not simultaneously changed substantively changed, in the last decade. The conversation the project started has been deferred, not closed, and so this panel discussion today continues that conversation. Or rather, we hope it does. We've got Anoli first. I'm going to ask you. In the book, the 𝘕𝗠𝗪 book project, Suresh Jairam's essay describes the project as an arranged marriage between the 2 collaborators of the project, an experiment in which Sri Lankan, regional, international artists would reflect on the social realities in their art and act as catalysts for positive change. In a sense, this frames the entire residency and project output as well as a lens through which we could interrogate the project. My question to you is, in your own words, what is 𝘕𝗠𝗪 in retrospect about, and what inspired it then, and what significance does it have today in revisiting it?
First of all, about the Central Samudra. It was actually a project that came about through friendship mostly, because by that time we started. This is a project of the International Artists Collective, which was active from 2000 onwards. So we, as our primary goal was to connect with the outside, because at that time we feared that the local art scene actually was not really responding to our energy that we were having at the time, because it was the time that a lot of change happened. So we started with international workshops, residencies, and we went on for some time. And then, during this time, we also developed a network of artists within South Asia. So this also brought about a lot of friendships. So the Setu Samudra project is one of those projects. So I would say it really came out of friendship and camaraderie that we were building. And actually, can we say when we started? We can't say, because the conversations were going on, and we also can't say when it has stopped, because it's based on friendship. So yeah, we were also interested in long-term project that Artist Exchange will continue for some time, because we were also doing workshops and residencies, which were basically artists come together, stay for 3 months, 3 weeks, or so 2 weeks, and then they leave. So those kinds of programs are a bit less personal than I would say something like Setu Samudra. You see, so, and we also wanted, Sri Lanka was going through a different, interesting period, because we had finished the 30-year war and the economic, the society's rebuilding economically and, trying to get good salaries. And also, at that time, there were certain geopolitical situations, and also artists, they are available. So we were interested in looking at what we have missed, what is there, what we have missed, and also kind of reflecting on it. So it's a project of curiosity. Did I?
I think you did. And what's the significance of having it reshown it today in this current place?
Okay. Well, after 16 years, the contemporary situation is contemporary. The art has changed. The geopolitics have changed. So I think, and also another thing is that people now have forgotten what happened then. So we also wanted to bring, we have started this series called Weerasinghe series, which we bring, resurface some of the interesting programs we did at the time. And because I think that is part of our contemporary art history. So, and whatever that is happening now is a take off from that. So I think it's important to kind of revisit these things and create discussion now. So, yeah, so this is it.
Okay, so following on from that, Jagath, in the book, the project curators position the project within the specific political context of the time, highlighting, of course, at that time, the long shadow of the civil war. Jara's essay, for example, adds that the conscious, perhaps of the artist, the consensus has been to move beyond the blame game and instead gather cultural fragments to reconcile and find ways to address long-term democratic solutions. And yet one of the concerns that have come up over time has been that there is a lack of tenor voice or tenor representation speaking for themselves in the project. which makes that positioning a political or positioning of the political context of the time more of a background rather than actual engagement. So my question to you is, given the curatorial decision then to prioritize reconciliation and explicitly cite that, and to have this conversation about what moving forward might look like, is there something that you might have or could have done differently?
The audience should know that, few sent the questions beforehand, so we are ready to answer. And thank you for bringing this Radhika, as you know, it's a big song. So, and she sent also very difficult questions, and I have a very way of going with her. You see, this project, as Anoli was saying, we did not know when we started as such, because he was came out of a particular point, time, and that we had Indian artists, Pakistani artists, Bangladesh, we were all people together, and we want to go beyond residencies, have a long-term relationship. That's how it happened. And to respond to you, I need to say, I want to be clear about it. I have a long answer. I want to be clear about the moment in which the sack was said about what had happened and what it was actually responding to. For me, as the Sri Lankan University, it was not just an art project. It was a wider political agenda in our heads. It was around 2011, 2 years after the end of the war. The war had ended not with the political settlement, but with the military victory and a triumphalist, ethno-nationalism that had no interest in asking why the war had happened in the first place. I'm sure you all remember, that ethno-nationalist we were asking that question, why did this war happen? There are so many answers, but we had a different answer. And one of the answers, we kept arriving when we were looking for answers, why did it happen, was this. Actually, I'm responsible for this explanation. I'm talking to you as an art historian and an archaeologist at this point, more than not merely as an artist. And one of the answers we kept arriving at was this. Sinhala society has been institutionally structured to not to know the Tamil culture as such, not just Tamil Sri Lankan culture, the larger Tamil civilization of the world. South Indian art, South Indian literature, South Indian rhythms and aesthetic life. We were never taught about any of these things. Those were not part of our university curriculums. And there was no, even when we had a major war for close to 3 decades, we still don't have a meeting of our state university. Since the Tamil cultural studies center, if you had an intellectual approach to the issue, you should have had several Tamil cultural studies center. Any of the in our state, we didn't have that. There were no specialized art history courses on South Indian art. We talk of South India as what? Indian art. You see, the Chola bronzes, the Pallava sculpture, the Radicle architecture tradition, the very traditions of which we cannot really understand the art of 𝘓𝑚 or the bronzes in our National Museum. Were not part of Sri Lankan university education. We have never tried to theorize the idea of South India beyond two notions. One is influence, the other one is popular notion. And then we also realize, we talked about length, going through airports and spending time in India, we have looked at this. This is not an accident. It is the institutional expression of Mahavamsa. The idea that we the Sinhala Buddhists, to which I am a Sinhala and I'm a Buddhist. And we are another people. And this is from and threatened by the Dravidian South. The myth have to suppress the knowledge of South Indian culture to sustain itself. produced generation after generation through the University of 𝘕𝘂𝘓, and all that, through art and physical, through absence of institutional structures, for knowing the neighbor is part of what made the work possible. So not the proximate was possible, but part of the 𝘕𝘭𝘂𝘁𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗵 infrastructure. So SAP, in my head, at least, I can take Anoli and all the members. In our head, was a response to that infrastructure. We were not celebrating post for healing at that point. But there were reasons we couldn't be celebrating. We were diagnosing a pre-war pathology that had not been named in our discussions about it. We did not name that pathology. Our resistance to understand South India as a cultural entity in relation to us. And that nobody in the state education apparatus had any interest in this matter. So this is what the collaboration. With 𝘕𝘂𝘓 was about. Not symbolic reconciliation, but a living encounter with the cultural world that our institution had taught us not need to know. That was the challenge. We, in fact, when doing that, this is where my art history is coming in. In fact, continuing what 𝘕𝗪𝘗𝗁𝘂𝘕 began in 1909, Kumaraswamy showed decades ago, first century of the 20th century, in his study of medieval Sinhalese art, how much our sculptural artistic traditions and the Radicle culture in general share with South India. The SAP, Self-Sambhagam Art Project, tried to make that kinship felt, not just art, through living artistic collaboration across the state. We were spending precisely the people that made the single and the binary field end and better. That's what we were. So when people ask, why are they known 𝘕𝘂𝘓, there are so many other reasons. But as the curator, I did not push that idea of 𝘕𝘂𝘓 because that was not our intention. It was not about leading out of the world. It was looking at the pathology that made all these things possible. One of pathology. So I want to point out the project deepest political work was aimed at unsettling signals and methodology, not at representing Tamil presence. Those are different projects. Yeah. And also, I realized this project was not revolving around the single Tamil axis. When this one was deliberately about the single South Indian axis, we were trying to resolve the vantage point that makes those identities, single Tamil identities, as fixed things. Go ahead and get Kumaraswamy's medieval Sinhalese art. The Sinhalese in that book is not what we think it is. It's not quite. So as the Sri Lankan curator of SAP, I want to say clearly the political vision of this project was wider than either the single act or national spread. Our contention is that you cannot adequately understand this island, its art, its culture, its history, its present crisis, if you look at it only from within. You have to look at it from South India, it was split to miles of water. I think should I stop there? I don't know. So, what is this okay with my copy? When you do that, we had lots of anxiety in those days. We had so many Tamil friends, we had so many Indian friends. So people really in this, we have really good friends, and we don't know very much, right? We know their names and their belongings.
At that time, this is, we were building this network, and we were in a network. Pakistan has experienced the same thing. Bangladesh is, so we was politically as well as in terms of contemporary, a lot of changes happening. So I think this is the kind of project that all of us would feel comfortable about, working. We wanted to kind of not go through this official not go through these official voices, but try to go beyond that, you know.
If you spend time looking at this book, you will see what I'm trying to say. When you do that, when you look at this book from South India, what you see is not a single island threatened by Tamil presence, nor a Tamil homeland denied by single power. You see a cultural and civilizational zone that is deeply constitutively South Indian in its formation, and in which both single and Tamil identities, as they have been constructed by modern nationalists such as parochial simplification of richer and more entangled reality. This is what we were South India, Sri Lanka has a much more entangled reality which have been
Stuck on the binary.
I will stop there, but at some point, Radhika, with your permission and also with the permission of the panelists, allow to go into address to the kind of question that we were thrown at by our funders, especially our Euro-African funders. What is the gender balance in these projects? Where are Tamil voices, where are Muslims and all that? How do we have, I have to tell you this, the 𝘗𝘳𝘪 International Artists Collective got the international funding until 2019. But 𝘗𝘳𝘪 there was only one woman in its board, and that was Anoli. There were no minorities. But we got funding. But we had a way of dealing with those questions, and I would like to share with this audience how we dealt with it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's a really deep answer to that question, and I think I understand what you said. And maybe I'll just check with you just so that I know that the audience is clear on it as well. Is what you're saying basically that rather than the binaries of the singular Tamil nationalisms that we need to focus on, we need to look beyond that and below it to see what the ancient connections and the contemporary, ancient and contemporary connections were with South India that we as a singular quality have often not engaged with. Right, I think I got that right. Okay, thank you so much for that. I mean, I would love to listen to the rest of that in a lecture format. So this is a good time to come to you because it connects with what you say and with what I think he finally said that I understood. The 𝘗𝘳𝘃 project, this project, positioned itself outside the state-driven architecture of cultural exchange and diplomacy, and intentionally and explicitly so. And it produced an alternative vocabulary, at least in the book, that talked about shared histories, civilizational ties, people-to-people connection. 𝘗𝘳𝘃, in retrospect today, is located within a geopolitical landscape that is very different and has shifted considerably from when this project was articulated. So, for example, when Modi visited Sri Lanka last year, the visit produced moments of cultural diplomacy and promise of it, like the Ramayana Trail initiative and many others, a defense cooperation MOU, and also development outcomes, like the 𝘠𝗏𝗁 railway, and of course the possibility of a real bridge. The economic and the ecological impact of it still needs to be discussed. So, my question to you is, with 𝘗𝘳𝘃 in retrospect showing now, in this environment, where bridge building seems to be the central Indian policy, what is the broader political resonance of showing this project now, and the project itself as you see it? And I think Jagath started on a very good point about the connections and exploring and dismantling those connections. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the contemporary.
Better? Because this is a restaurant. And I'm really, I'm the China shop and the impatient person. So, the way I understood it, Radhika, I think your question and the preamble had, I got two questions. One is about, and let me deal with the first one. One is about this whether 𝘬𝘳𝘃𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗺 located outside the state-centric way of doing cultural diplomacy, and the answer is, Suresh has already given the answer, it is. And I think it is good that it is, because the state, I don't think, when I say the state, I mean the state as an idea, whether it's the Indian state, Sri Lankan or whatever. These entities cannot do serious cultural exchange. And I'll tell you why. Now, not too long ago, the former director of the 𝘔𝘪𝘁𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗪 Institute, which is an extension of our foreign ministry, wanted to organize a discussion precisely on this theme, cultural difference. But it was shot down by the director saying that it basically was the speakers were controversial, and so the speakers were me, whereas 𝘚𝘳𝘪 goes director of the South Cultural Center in Colombo, and 𝘚𝘳𝘪 people who have worked on these kinds of things. Right? Now, if a think tank that is linked directly to our foreign ministry does not understand cultural diplomacy, then we have a very serious problem. Now this is the Sri Lankan part. Now you take another example for comparison, and that is South Asian University, which I taught for 13 or 14 years. Before I left, there was a curatorial note that I helped write, which was to ensure that the university's art acquisition did reflect South Asian sensibility, because I didn't go from Sri Lanka to Delhi to set up an Indian institution. I went to set up a South Asian institution, right? Now what happens? By today, art acquisition happens from what I hear, but it has become a very strange project. People don't deal with the private sector. That is the kind of galleries that these sorts of artists and our Indian colleagues and friends also exhibit. But art is acquired on the basis of calling for tenders. So, whichever is the cheapest. You have 3 tenders, some guy from somewhere gives a kind of a cheap version, that's the thing that comes to you. Okay, state-centered cultural politics. Now, this is not going to work if you are serious about cultural exchange, right? What happens in organizations like SAARC, or governments, whether it's Sri Lanka, India or something else, is that cultural exchange and diplomacy happens on the basis of lists maintained by national governments or political parties in power at a particular time. Right? So what that means is, those lists do not necessarily include people who have produced good work in their respective fields. They include people who are closer to power. Right? So what does it mean? It means that the kind of cultural exchange, the kind of cultural products that you will exchange through that kind of thing is likely to be fairly meaningful. So then, obviously, 𝘬𝘳𝘃𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗺 was not going to do that. They were going, and as a result, because they did not go through the state, what happened was the kind of politics and the kind of art that was produced was I would say, did not get filtered through the apparatus of the state. Right? So they were independent. So I think the fact that Suresh Jairam and One Shanti Road and Anoli Jagath and their colleagues
decided to do it very differently is a credit to them. Right? And I think for me, culture, when it comes to cultural exchange, the state model is an absolute thing. This is not something you want to do. Now I come to the second part of your question. So today's 𝘱𝘳𝘗𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝘀 exhibition, that is not that exhibition 15 years ago, today's re-exhibition, takes place in a vastly transformed geopolitical context. Right? It has shifted culturally. I would say it has shifted politically and certainly in terms of public rhetoric. So, these people in their project were talking about the kind of a metaphorical bridge that existed, that didn't exist, that was built, that was not built, and that they wanted to build, and so on. So that was talking about a particular kind of connectivity that upon which the state did not have an unnecessary impact through visa relatives. They wanted to be in touch with their friends across the region. Now, the idea of a 30-kilometer bridge between Rameswaram and 𝘬𝘓𝘓 is part of India's policy called Sri. India's High Commissioner in May 2026 said in Colombo that time for wavering over the bridge is over. So he's in a mighty hurry to build this bridge, right, whether he likes it or not. Now, for a moment, let's look at the history of this idea, because this is after all an idea. And I think the idea of the physical bridge, not that bridge that 𝘱𝘳𝘗𝘗𝘃𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀 is talking about, is not adequately understood by our people, and certainly not by our political leaders. But it is not merely a simple idea of connectivity simply for the ease of travel, commerce, and economic prosperity, as many people usually say. Right? Indian supporters as well as the unreflecting Sri Lankan supporters. Now, I agree that if you build this kind of bridge, along with the national grids and fuel storage systems and all these kind of things, there is potential for economic prosperity too. Right? It's a commercial potential. But, notwithstanding that, it is simultaneously a mythological, politico-ideological, and military expansionist concept too. Now, when you are looking at the possibility of putting this into practice, you can't look at only commerce. You can't only look at ease of travel, you also have to look at all these items. So, mythologically, it is explicitly supposed to emulate the Ram Setu, the mythical bridge believed to have been built by Hanuman and his troops for God Ram and his divine army to invade Ravana's Lanka in mythological times according to Rama. Now to us in this country, Ramayana is a story. But for Indian nationalists and Hindu devotees from that country, the Ramayana is neither myth nor story. It is an ideological statement of power and hegemony that has been unquestionably carved into popular history and taken for granted fact. So this is not some story, right? In politico-ideological terms, it tallies seamlessly with the post-19th century notion of what is known as Akhand Bharat or undivided India, which includes Sri Lanka and much of the rest of South Asia and Myanmar in its imagination. 19th and early 20th century Indian maps formulated as Mother India almost always included Sri Lanka as part of this imagination. Now it is also present day cartographic reality because when the Indian government inaugurated its new parliament building in New Delhi in 2023, it had the same map. Incorporating Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar and Sri Lanka, and we are the only country that did not do this. Right? Now, if you look at the history a little bit, 2002, Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Anoli Perera at that time In 2017, during his second visit to Sri Lanka, the Indian Prime Minister proposed the idea more seriously and forcefully, emulating the mythical Ram statement itself. He even quoted from the poem by 𝘕𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗏, who also talked of this situation. Right? Of course, interestingly, Bharati's reference to Sri Lanka is 𝗥𝗲𝘂𝗪, right? But that's a separate, I'm not going to go. 6 years later, in 2023, when President Weerasinghe visited Delhi, this idea preempted. It is truly unfortunate that Mr. Weerasinghe gave his consent to this idea to be included in the document known as Promoting Connectivity, Catalyzing Prosperity, India-Sri Lanka Economic Partnership Vision, agreed upon by the two leaders in 2023. Now, the concern I have is, while it comes as an agreement agreed to by these two leaders, it gives the idea that this is a Sri Lankan consent, which it does not. Right? It was not debated in our parliament or public discussions. Now, post 2024, that is today, Sri Lanka has chosen, even though very informally, not to proceed with the land bridge proposal since the present political dispensation came to power. Now, as a result, when our President visited New Delhi in December 2024, our diplomats managed to get this idea out of the formal agenda of that visit. Okay. And also, when Mr. Modi came to visit us in his most recent visit, it remained out of the agenda. Now, the point is this: despite these subtle objections and reversals from Sri Lanka, the idea has been brought up by Modi himself in several meetings and social media posts, and now more bluntly by India's Anoli Perera in May 2022. See, I don't have a problem. The Indian government has a policy towards our country on the basis of their nationality. Right? I do have a problem when our people and our leaders also do not have a policy towards this. In other words, who is representing Sri Lanka's national interest? Now, with all this, what I want to say is that your idea of 𝘕𝗕𝘂𝘃 is manifesting in the midst of all these other discourses of 𝘕𝗕𝘂𝘃, which are far more powerful than anything you can think of. So, the question I have is, isn't it possible that your discourse and your idea of connectivity, which I also share, being a South Asian, I might sound like a nationalist today, but I'm actually a South Asian. That isn't enough to go this. But isn't it possible that your discourse of that kind of connectivity with mutual respect and reciprocity might be subsumed in that respect, over which you have no control? That is my question. Okay, so I'll stop for the moment.
Radhika, I can add something. We were doing this project, and I did not share this with anyone who was going to this project at all, and I went in here because, the master signifier, master narrative that was working in our thinking is Mahamasa and the academic friend. So when we were doing this, there was a risk that we could not entirely escape with Satsang is coming to the same point from different software I thought. But I was aware this is within the project, as it was happening, there were the moments that South India stops being a critical advantage point to look at us. You can see some of the drawings, it becomes a positive identity. The moment the argument said that Sri Lanka really belongs to this world, we realized, I'm sorry that I say I take all the people, but I realized we have simply produced a counter narrative within blind spots and its own exclusions. We did not want one master signifier to be replaced by another master signifier. Yeah, true, we know that we could do it, but we feel like even within our friends and all, and the way they thought of Sri Lanka, basically, we interrogate the drawings, we could see it become a master. So, but we were attempting, I have to say ourselves, I have to say, but we were attempting to use South India as a vantage point, not as a new answer, but as a position from which the existing narratives on ethnic origin and cultural distinct thus could be seen for what it is, a constructed story, not a natural one. The deep civilization and connections across the box do not resolve Sri Lankan ethnic question. They expose the false resolution that nationalist mythologies already used to. That was the market. We only use South India as a market to look at it.
I think that to talk about these official narratives, I think the official narratives are always there, the same way, even before, right? But I think the dialogue we started, it is not in, it is not in response to them or not. It was totally an independent thing. People can always connect our narrative to whatever their agenda is. But for us, state discussions, state narratives, all these things are going on. Even at that time, it was going on. So, but I don't know there's a thing of subscribing, our narrative or the state narrative. I think we will always be an independent narrative. Alternative narrative.
What we are saying is not only technically ours, of course, Kumaraswamy put this to see, and this is not in my head, to me, everyone said that he was speaking.
You were thinking about Kumaraswamy at this time, like you were doing. Yeah, you are a historian. Yeah. I mean, we were artists, we were curious, we were interested.
We have to catch our similarities and the differences.
Art can be an intellectual project, yes, I agree. But I think this is a good time to ask one final question for all three of you, particularly because now we've bridged into something very interesting here about vantage point and also about some narratives, the larger dominant narratives that are out there, right? So basically I want to ask all three of you a question, because in the book, one of the interesting things about how it was presented is that it is presented as an adamant need to be right here, right now, and not imagine a place elsewhere, or to do art, or to present them as well. Right? That is one of the quotations from the book. So given that these artworks were produced to make sense of that time, but also that the bridges that were being built across the two artworks at that specific historical moment, as you said, we were just artists, we were thinking about how to collaborate and curiosity, all that in your head, and in his head it is about Kumaraswamy, obviously. But what I really, and what you were talking about earlier, what I think I guess what I'm asking is it's important to have this conversation about Sri Lanka's relationship to India vis-a-vis the art world today. And how do the three of you see that in the context of Setu Samudra, in the context of bridge building, in the context of perhaps Big Brother? How do you see that connection? Is the Indian art looking at us or looking with us? And is there something we can do to ensure that our voice remains, that we have parity in voice?
What I can say is Sri Lankan contemporary art has evolved so much, and infrastructure has evolved, and of course now you can see a large interest from India, from the artist community, gallery community, wanting to represent Sri Lankan artists. So yeah, of course, because remember there is art market that controls a lot. See, the I'm sorry to say, but galleries where they look at artists, there's always, they want to show good art, but there's also economic, monetary aspect attached to it. They would promote artists if they think that they will go somewhere, right? And then there's also institutional endorsements. Right now, in the 90s, this is a big difference between that and now. In the 90s, that decade, we didn't have that kind of international endorsements, galleries, but now you have it. So it's another force in the record, and now we had Sotheby's auction. So all these things expose Sri Lankan art to an international forum continuously. And so now, when you say, I don't know, are they working looking with us or looking at us? I think it's both happening in the 1860s.
Yeah. Well, that was important to enhance that all that mass. We have seen as art characters in European art collectors look at us, but there's something about Sri Lankan art. So sometimes they live in the margin, uses bonds, tax, you don't give much about the power of the center. You have lived a long life in a difficult terrain for too long. Someone like me, I don't care how 𝘠𝗪𝘂𝘀𝗋𝗋 think about my art opinion. They don't have to exist for me as such. Because I have lived my life in this south of the south with my friends and with my art collector friends. I have a pretty okay life. So that arrogance I have learned. Not only me, Anoli has that arrogance. Most of us have that arrogance, You don't.
But I wonder whether that is, they are the artists who came from that time period. I don't know about the contemporary artists. They have that, the younger generation. Whether they are.
And Anoli and I take a perfect pleasure in saying no to these 𝘠𝗪𝘂𝘀𝗋𝗋 sometimes. And we should not have that perfect pleasure. Many times happens to this policy, you don't let everyone to be on the margin, exploit them. If not, they live in the margin, they become strong and attack the center. So that's what's happening more or less in art world when it comes to us.
See, I look at all this somewhat differently. I do agree with these guys. But the problem I have is something fundamental. And that is, even though I think our art has now, it can compete with art that is produced anywhere in the world, including in India. But I also think if not for the relationship that these people forge with galleries and collectives in India, Pakistan, later in Nepal and Bangladesh, I think the recognition of your art globally would have been slow. I think the fact that your art happened to be represented by galleries in India and so on and so forth did help you go into the global art. I think that we have to recognize. And that came from kinds of projects like 𝘧𝗪𝘂𝘀𝗋𝗋. That is one. But the problem I have, it's not a problem, it's a concern, is that I was hoping at the time this exhibition first got underway that art would be moving in a direction where it will also help decolonize, some of our theoretical approaches to art history as well as the way relations between countries happen. But the art would not be commenting on social relations and international relations in a way that makes sense. Right? What I'm trying to say is this. Now, if you look at the exhibition, I don't know what is going on here right now, but if you look at some of our exhibitions, like your exhibition that were in the 1990s and so on, it was very clear that these were commenting on our histories, your personal histories, as well as what was happening in the world. Right? Now, these were fairly important political discourses, but I did not see from these important exhibitions and also very important curatorial notes, what I did not see was a kind of a South Asian or Sri Lankan theoretical reckoning that came out of this. And I think that is because we still believe as people, I think, that theory and philosophy somehow have to be produced in the West by a bunch of old white people and sometimes a little white women, and then have to be brought to our part of the world, with which we will have to look at our context. Now, this is the way the colonial project taught us. Now, fine, I don't have a problem with the colonial project. I have a problem with the post-colonial context in which we operate. So, now that is now you have the material, right, in your experience, in your thinking, in your experience, but you haven't theorized it. You have theorized it in your head, you talk to me about it, you have to put it in writing, right? What I'm trying to say is that this is also something not just for Sri Lanka. I see, just like post-structuralism and postmodernism and so on and so forth. Okay, I have read Foucault and Derrida and all these guys too. I enjoy reading it. But I also think we have things to tell the world too. Now, this is why last year in December, an Indian colleague and I, we edited a book called, I forget, South Asian Keywords, or Decolonial Keywords, South Asian Thoughts and Attitudes. But we were trying to look at concepts and things in our language, Sinhala, Tamil, Malayalam, Hindi, Bengali, all these kinds of things, and to see whether there are concepts in these things that can go in the direction of theorizing our reality. That is what you people should do, which I think you are
sort of alluding to. Sort of alluding to it, maybe we have approached the question of like new colonialism. But anyway, I think it's a good time to ask the audience to pose some questions, because we are going now into the vortex of conversations here. So please.
I have a comment, not a question. Thank you. Sorry, I have a comment, not so much a question. I disagree with the starting point of this bridge. With the information I have, the first time this bridge was built was in the 70s by Mrs. Bhandara. She asked for it. India never asked for it at the beginning. You can check it out. I think you need to get the facts right. We asked for it in the 70s. Thank you.
Questions? There's some very interesting things that have been said. Does anyone have a question or comment on the artwork, or the content, or the bridge itself, the metaphorical bridge, the real bridge? Lots of ideas have been posed today. Wow, you're reading of your that has not been all that good for us sometimes. It's a tough question.
That's another question. Thank you.
It's a tough question, but art washing is a real thing.
Yeah, see, this is the question next. Actually, why? And I think that the discomfort is appropriate. Every artist in the world shares discomfort if you are successful. Let me try to be honest about several things at once. SAP's 𝘚𝘪𝘵𝘩𝘢 was not a reconciliation. It was a project of ideological mishandling. Named as single or and underlying, whatever. But I cannot claim that its existence in the post-war cultural landscape was, I cannot claim that it was politically neutral. In a context where the art landscape was performing normalcy and healing while talking accountability, a visible cultural activity, however critical its internal logic, risk being absorbed in that process. I know one of my, I consider that one of my best works. But I know that it is hung in a place. When people are asking, what happened on that painting now? Is your cost? Whatever. See? So, I did not control that. No one can control that. What I can control is whether I am willing to name. That is, so more broadly, yes, I think the Sri Lankan art world, like art world in comparable post-conflict context globally, has sometimes provided cultural cover for performing reconciliation. Not through bad things, I must insist, not through bad things, but through the structural logic of how art institutions operate. They need funding, they need visibility, they need international legitimacy, and all of these things create pressure that gradually align the institution's interest with the interest of the dominant political culture. However much its participants resist that consciously, that any artist, any researcher, any writer, this we are doing a capitalist work. So we have no problem. And yes, in artists, we participate in the artists. We benefit from them. We also know that the Biennale is one of the primary mechanisms through which post-colonial and capitalist guilt gets aestheticized and discharged without being structurally addressed. Knowing this and continuing to participate is a genuine conviction. And I do not think that can be resolved clearly. What I can do is refuse to pretend that contradiction does not exist. I do understand, which is, I think, the minimum condition of intellectual understanding of any art, or for that matter, any curator working in the landscape today. Art working happens. More so with Biennale, not when is Biennale to document them. I mean, they try to be very critical. No, that's not Japanese art washing. It is capitalism. It is that brutal underbelly of capitalism that allows those projects to happen. And you know, in the world, like the first thing it criticizes some, talks about marginalized people, and the very next day, government, they promote genocide in our place and they can genocide in art working happens. So that's my answer.
Save some. This is one reason that we want to look at things and do some project, because now when you look at the contemporary art in Sri Lanka, and now the opportunities are presented much more, and the dynamics have changed. I mean, like. We didn't have many forums to show our work, and there were no international festivals for us to get endorsement or So then you are, is not driven by all, those acknowledgements or other opportunities. You know what I'm saying? That, we won't produce work to document or but now it has changed. So with that change, there are risks, there are casualties, and the gallery systems have to expand, and even institutionalized festivals are coming into Sri Lanka. So where art washing can happen.
Just imagine this audience, just think of a scenario like this. A body wants the bridge to build, and we are, even they can take the say social project as part of it. So are you going to blame us then? Well, art is like science. Now you are not going to do what the artist do. You cannot control the afterlife of an artist. That's the reality. Okay.
See, I do agree that artists may not be able to control what happens to their work. I mean, it happens to all of us. My work, it's not art. My work on Christianity in Nepal and later in Sri Lanka have been used out of context in both countries. There's nothing you can do about it. Once it's in the public domain, it can be used and abused. But all I'm saying is that I'm not worried about that project. My concern is that if it does happen, you or we have to be able to intervene. Now, when my work was used out of context in Sri Lanka, I wrote to whoever wrote in some newspaper or something. I did counter. It's just a simple example. Because my problem is, my concern or the problem is that I don't want something as thoughtful as, say, to some your version to become something else or to be thought of as something else. The final thing about 𝗦𝗲𝘓 being the first, I have no idea. I have done my research, but I couldn't find anything in reference to Mrs. 𝗦𝗲𝘓. It is possible she thought about it and asked, and it might be lost to history. It is possible. What I do know is that even before, the British did think about it. They talked about and they did a survey to try and implement a bridge. They didn't do it because of the expenditure of World War I, even though the technology existed. But they did build the trade part of it, both in Sri Lanka and India. And it went on and it functioned until 1960 something, 1962 or something, because of there was a cyclone which destroyed particularly the Indian infrastructure, and then it stopped because even when I was small, I remember my parents telling me, you can buy a ticket from Colombo to New Delhi, and you could, and the visas was another matter, but you could buy a ticket. So that link exists. That was a colonial project purely thought of as an extension of commerce. Right? So now we can.
And if there are any questions, any follow-ups?
Sorry, it was a little late. I hope you can hear me. I have a small response on what Sasanka raised just before the last session about the reading way of maybe reading art. I'm not in much support of. I heard it very similar to like something tabled by 𝘥𝘓𝘁, right? This regionalism or something. Because I know we cannot go for such a deep theoretical discussion, but I just want to table this. My question is that most of the Sri Lankan so-called modern artists, they have learned from Western culture, as an abstract expressionism or contemporary or anything, you name anything, most of the shamans are Westerners. And Sri Lankan gallery structures, those are Westerners. All the gallery structures, even though you take a commercial gallery like Lionel Bench or any curated gallery, even this gallery, all we are having the same, very similar to Western gallery structure. And even this kind of discussions, even today I can see some foreigners, but mostly we discuss these things in English. Even the audience is seeing. So why not theory? That's my question. What's the only issue you have with theory, right? My key point is I agree that you take name Derrida, right? You take Ardha or anybody. Those people, I really agree that they hardly take any Asian artworks as their examples. That's so true, and I agree. But the doctrines, if you take those doctrines which tabled by theories, I think it cannot be marginalized or undermined to any kind of particular region or any country. That's universal, my point.
I think you have to start reading a new book of things. Couple of things. We'll talk about this later. But I like the fact that these galleries are Western models. Because we have, when I talk about these things, so, see, when I said some of those things, I'm not being anti-Western, right? I was trained in the West, I took the best of it, but I don't want to be colonized by the West or anybody else. It's very simple. But gallery structure, I mean, what do you mean is Western? I mean, structures are structures, right? That is one. Second, no, let me finish. See, this whole business about universality of theory is a very dangerous thing. Because now this has been contested at least since the 1970s. So I am suggesting that you read this excellent essay called Working Across Tradition by 𝘠𝘳𝘁𝗵𝘂𝘀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝘀 and 𝘠𝑒𝑟𝑒𝑐ℎ, which actually talks about in very sensible ways why the whole problem of assuming theory is universal is a problem. I do agree that certain things can be of universal validity, but it doesn't mean that everything is, because theoretical approaches and conceptual categories emerge from particular histories, particular temporal moments. That doesn't necessarily mean they can be imposed everywhere else, right? I mean, these are things that have been written about since the 1970s, like the decolonial theories too. And there's a huge discourse in India, not huge, but fairly consistent discourse in India. It hasn't happened here. Now, about this problem of English, I also have a concern, right? But then how do you do this? Now, if I talk in Sinhala, people who speak in Tamil will not understand. And if they speak in Tamil, I don't understand. And if we speak in English, most of our people will not understand, but the kinds of people who come here will understand. So you have to make certain compromises, right? And second, I think the bottom line is that the language of the world today is English. And I mean, my Sinhala is very good, right? But I write most of my academic things in English because I want not only you, but the rest of the world to read what I am writing too. But I will fail in my beauty and my own conviction if I don't write in the local languages too, which I am trying to do, right? Because the bottom line, and with this and this applies to art history and sociology and so on and so forth, I don't think we can be in this, the single saying is simply because we have to, I am not interested in producing knowledge and neither do these people for only Sri Lankan consumption. Yes, the theoretical practices and approaches should come from our experiences so that they are reckoned with, but they should be able to speak to the world. And to do that, we have to speak English.
very much. And thank you to the audience for sitting through this very interesting conversation that I hope we take forward. And I hope you publish it and maybe lead to the lecture for 3 or 5-hour lecture. All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Good evening. As we come to the end of today's proceedings, I would like to extend a sincere thanks to Radhika for providing this wonderful space. Radicle for providing this wonderful space as a platform for a conversation that has gone well beyond conventional discussions on art. Located in a central and historical significant city, Radicle offers the ideal ambience and accessibility for meaningful cultural engagement. As a young and dynamic gallery, it has the potential to play an important role in nurturing and promoting contemporary art. MiAC is delighted to have collaborated with Radicle, and we look forward to continuing this friendship and partnership in the years ahead, creating many thought-provoking discussions, exhibitions, and events. As we've experienced in the past, long-standing collaborations often lead to most exciting and meaningful conversations and artistic projects. On behalf of MiAC and Radicle, I would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to Radhika for moderating today's discussion so skillfully. Through her insightful and well-curated questions, she guided the panel with great sensitivity and helped bring forth a rich and engaging conversation. My sincere thanks also goes to our distinguished panelists for sharing their knowledge and perspectives on the 𝘕𝗪𝗪 art project, while also offering a thoughtful and critically engaging discussion on geopolitical dimensions surrounding the 𝘕𝗪𝗪 channel and the relationship between India and Sri Lanka. Their contributions have given us much to reflect upon and have enriched today's dialogue immensely. To our audience, thank you for joining us this evening. Your presence, thoughtful questions, and active participation have made this event all the more meaningful. Finally, my sincere thanks to Mahesh and the entire team at Radicle for their warm hospitality, generosity, and meticulous attention to every detail. You have made us feel truly welcome, and it has been a pleasure to share this space with you. Thank you all. We wish you a very pleasant evening.